Welcome to Gone Phishing, a show diving into the cybersecurity threats that surround our highly connected lives. Every human is different. Every person has unique vulnerabilities that expose them to potentially successful social engineering. On this show, we'll discuss human vulnerability and how it relates to unique individuals. I'm Connor Swalm, CEO of Phin Security, and welcome to Gone Phishing.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Gone Phishing. I am joined once again by myself. It's just me here in this room by myself talking to you, straight to you through your earbuds right now or onto the screen that you're watching me on. And I wanted to talk about a topic that I think about all the time. I've been reading a lot about this lately. I would love some conversation around it. I'd love to see more conversation about it in general, but specifically with me, I'm selfish that way as I like talking. And it's, can we actually understand human behavior? Now, I'm not talking about this from like some kind of evolutionary perspective, specifically in how it relates to security, behaviors that increase, decrease, or, help security remain stagnant, which in some cases is an improvement. And how all the ways that your biology might impact that, what kind of behaviors do get motivated, how we can motivate less risky behaviors and more good ones. It's really interesting to me to try and understand that. So a big misconception I see in the security industry, and it's, motivated usually with good intentions, is blaming the human for a security breach. And let me explain that. If you, interpret Verizon's data breach and investigation report, if you interpret largely any other conversation or any other talk by any security spokesperson or group of people that release security breach-related data, you'll arrive at a conclusion that is, wow, humans' mistakes are incorporated into and sometimes cause the majority of breaches. A stat that I use because it's really convenient is one that's released by Verizon's DBIR as of 2023, which is 86% of the breaches involve humans. So whether it was the infiltration, the exfiltration, the expansion of authorization and access in a company, or getting access to other tools that existed, humans are involved. Humans are making mistakes. Now, I would caveat it with this. In order for a human to make a mistake at your company that put the company in a position of being vulnerable and, potential breach or incident response process needs to kick in, all of your software had to fail first. And let's try to understand. All of your software had to fail, and what was the source of that software? Well, you could say it was vendors, it was other companies, or even it was your own company that created and helped manage that software. What I'm trying to get at is who made that software? Throw out that GitHub Copilot exists, and I don't think we're in a world where all code will always be written by artificial intelligence. If we are there, reach out to me and tell me. That'd be pretty cool. One thing to note is that we have this intense blame and this culture as a society of blaming the human at the end of this, when at the end of the day, it's all humans all the way down, right? Whether it's software, technology, process, the physical company, building, or whether it was the human clicking a phishing email or letting somebody into a building. All of that involves humans. It's all here because humans woke up and did things. And so to blame the human that clicked the phishing link and to not try and go back to, all right, how could we have prevented this by creating better software, by putting better process in place, by doing better training, by enforcing that from the top down with our CEO and our managers, making sure people were trained properly. I think it's missing the point to blame the human at the end because it's humans all the way down. It's humans doing everything. And so, specifically when I see people blame, it's like, these dumb end users. I think that is the exact opposite way we should be approaching the problem of actually trying to change human behaviors and understand it. Because how many people, when their managers, cajole them or tell them they're doing a horrible job, they treat them like children and, go stand in the corner and think about what you've done kind of punishments. How many people have positive responses to that? For those of you just listening, I'm holding up a goose egg. That's a big zero. Nobody likes that. I don't like that. Not a single person on the planet would like to be treated like that. So what are you going to get? You're going to get more bad behavior because they're not going to care. I have actually seen evidences of employees that will go so far as to sabotage security at that point. There are numerous, dozens of cases of disgruntled employees actively sabotaging security at companies and banks and doing things. People might not go to that extreme where they will sabotage it, but maybe they start ignoring their training. Maybe they start ignoring doing certain things. Maybe they just don't care at that point. And that is a really dangerous place to be. So how did we get here? how did awareness training largely get to a point, and how have we failed to understand human behavior? So I'd caveat the following statements with this. Understanding and changing human behavior is quite possibly, I'm willing to say it's impossible. Let's just start there. And secondly, if any company can claim to understand and change human behavior and back it up with data, it's like they're the first company in the world as far as I'm concerned. So let's talk about awareness training. What is the history of security awareness training? Well, awareness training initially largely was started out of compliance. Social engineering started becoming a thing. With the advent of technology, it became way more in front of companies' faces. So with the internet, with personal computers, with cell phones, with all of that, social engineering became way more prevalent part of organized society's lives. And as a result, training people to recognize this became a part of compliance. You needed to train people to recognize it because it was expected that they would interface with all these things over the course of their life, both at the company and not at the company. And so it became a secure thing to do. Where that's led to is largely awareness training is a compliance exercise. If there's no culture setting behind, if there's no trying to understand why employees are doing the things that they're doing, what motivations they had in the first place, you're going to arrive at the exact same place we currently are. Like, we're going to keep doing the same things over and over again and expecting different results, which is that the majority of breaches are still caused because humans do things. And that's because if you divorce culture from the compliance, there's no motivation for any employee to try and understand it at a deeper level. There's no curiosity. There's no deeper understanding that they can tie into how they work and who they work with to create security. A very simple example of this. When you try and tell employees that security is an entire company's thing, right? When I go and talk to some of the clients of our partners here, I'm usually the first person to tell them that they have a place in security, and that it's not on the receiving end of some kind of punishment that, hey, if you're not secure, the company's not secure. Let's talk about it. I'm usually one of the first people to ever try and convince them of that. And I think that's a failure of leadership. I think that's a failure of awareness training. I think it's a failure of the industry in general. In order for security to be created, all the employees at a company need to be secure, even the ones that we would consider technically incompetent. All of them. Everyone needs to be secure. If they're interacting with the company and the company's clients, if they're doing something, they're interfacing with the processes and the systems that a company has, they have the ability to introduce or to remove risk from a company when it comes to cybersecurity. If we're unknowingly or actively trying to alienate them, we're essentially alienating like ourselves. We're alienating people who are also a part of security with us. And one thing that I see, the next stage of awareness training, above and beyond compliance, is trying to pull data in from other tools to try and understand human behavior. And I think one thing that history has taught us, and something that I try and read about all the time, is trying to understand human behavior is, I'll say it's impossible. You'll never be able to predict what a human will do in every single scenario, largely because you can't predict every single scenario, let alone how a human's going to, respond to that. But what you can do is try and train employees to be prepared for that scenario. So what I see, which is a slight misconception in my mind, is, well, if the current data we have access to doesn't tell us anything about human behavior, then we just need more data. All of that, that whole path of logic, that rests on the assumption that the data we have access to or do not have access to can actually tell us anything about human behavior. And there's this behavioral biologist guy by the name of Robert Sapolsky. If anyone knows him, actually, I'd really like to talk with him. I actually really like his books. So that's my ask. If you're listening or watching and you know Robert Sapolsky, I would love to chat with him. I would be infinitely in your debt for an introduction. But one thing that I've largely gathered from reading those books is, like, unless you could sequence somebody's genome all the way down to the building blocks of your DNA, there's no inherent way to understand exactly what that individual's behavior is going to be at exactly all points. It's like, in a world where everything is deterministic, right? The state of the world today creates the world that exists at the very next future moment. You would need to understand the exact the balance of neurotransmitters in somebody's brain. You need to understand the amount of hormones running through their body via their endocrine system, fight or flight mode. It's a common, psychological statement. And we don't have that. And that's also not what, people MFAing more often, or creating a more secure password, or shutting off their mobile device, or accessing less shadow IT. None of that information, none of that data has anything to do with the underlying motivations in biology that humans exhibit and have, whether they like to admit it or not. And so I think I think the industry has a chance of going down the really wrong path, which is trying to make the statement that, we just don't have the right data. And as a result, we just need more of it and we'll be able to make better predictions. I don't think that's the case. Now, at the end of the day, you can point to those behaviors I mentioned, like they do MFA more often, they do have stronger passwords, and you can make a claim that, maybe there is more security created via those things. But again, you'll never be able to remove risk. You'll never be able to get cybersecurity risk down to zero, which is what some people are complaining. You'll never get to remove humans from the fact that they cause breaches in a lot of ways, because you can't predict what humans are going to do at every single point in time forever. You just can't do it. And I see some folks, some figureheads in the industry, some companies in the industry trying to make claims like that, and I just think it misses the mark. So with that, incorporating data is not going to make us more accurate predictions. It's not to say we shouldn't integrate into more tool sets to try and understand what people's current sets of behaviors are, right? There's like a NIST's framework for understanding vulnerabilities. The first is to identify if there is a vulnerability, right? Understanding what human behaviors exist and what don't exist via if they MFA more often. Those are super pedantic examples, but you can understand what humans' past behaviors were by looking at the evidence of them, and through that you can try and remove some of those behaviors, or you can improve on others, but you can't predict how they'll behave. You just can't do that. And so, with that being said, all right, how do we try and influence it though? How do we try and influence the behaviors that somebody will exhibit? And it goes back to this, for those of you who played sports or understand sports, who are listening or watching. If you wanted to figure out how you're going to perform at game time, or how anyone's going to perform at game time, you need to simulate game time. You need to scrimmage, right? That's the word for it, scrimmage. And I was actually talking with somebody yesterday about this, where if she was on her crew team in college, and she said, if our practice wasn't as intense or more intense than game time, we would always fail. We'd never know how we were gonna how it was gonna work, because we didn't know how it felt. We didn't know what it was like to push ourselves to the limits. And I'm not saying people need to do that day in, day out at their jobs or anything like that. But what I am saying is, if the world is filled with cybersecurity threats, with social engineering, with AI written emails now, and voice calls from AI that trained on your CEO's voice because it's online, we should be testing people. We should be helping them recognize that is reality. They do not exist in a bubble behind the front desk of their company, locked away in a room. They're not as safe as they believe themselves to be, is kind of what I'm trying to say here. Is they are exposed to risks, and we should try and make them aware of it. What we need to do is we need to better simulate reality of that, not try and hide it from people, not try and cover them with more software, with more process, with more technology. We need to expose them to that, so that they can feel what it's like to perform or not perform at game time. It goes way beyond clicking a link and goes into reinforcing process. Like when somebody walks into your office, do you make them identify who they are? What do they have access to? What do they not have access to? Can they walk into the back of your room, plug something into your servers? That's something you should regularly test your employees on. At least send them a review of the policies and the procedures you have, and make them scroll through them and read them. But then going into more like phishing and social engineering, is every company with a security team, or people who are running their security, they know what kind of attacks are coming their way because they're actively fending them off. They're aware of it all. Well, why aren't we taking those attacks? That another way of saying fending off is eventually they'll get through. right? That's just another way of saying it. So why aren't we taking those attacks that are eventually going to get through and teaching employees what failure looks like when the cost of failure is maybe a small amount of embarrassment, but the exact experience with game time? That's where I think the industry needs to go. I think trying to understand human behavior via introducing more imperfect sets of data, more proxies for human behavior is a hopeless endeavor. I don't think it'll ever work. And I'm willing to have a debate about it. I'm willing to talk about that if you have any opinions on that. I think what we need to do instead is expose every employee to the reality of you are unsafe. You're unsafe in certain ways, and let's teach you what it's going to feel like when you're exposed to it for real. Let's see how you perform when it comes down to it. When the cost of failure is not going to be an IR process, incident response process, or a breach. When it's going to be maybe a little bit of embarrassment, but a huge learning opportunity. Thanks for letting me sit here and talk to you forever. I don't know, for the last 15, 20 minutes. These are things I think about all the time. If you have any comments or questions or concerns about it, always willing to chat about it. Find me on LinkedIn or reach out to the company here. We'll have links to all that in the show notes for you, so you could reach out. Always welcome any kind of criticism or any kind of advice, and I would love to hear from you. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. As always, everyone, thanks so much for tuning in to Gone Phishing. If you want to find out more about high-quality security awareness training campaigns, how to launch them in ways that actually engage employees to change their habits, then check us out, Phin Security, at phinsec.io. That's phinsec.io, or click all of the wonderful links in our show notes. Thanks for fishing with me today, and we'll see you next time.